On a freezing February morning in 1912, a solitary man climbed the iron stairs of the Eiffel Tower. He wore a thick, strange-looking coat that hung stiffly from his shoulders. Below him, Paris lay quiet under a pale layer of snow. A small crowd gathered at the base of the tower, staring upward. Reporters adjusted their cameras. Policemen waited near the landing area. No one in that crowd yet understood they were about to witness one of the most tragic experiments in the history of invention. The man was Franz Reichelt, an Austrian-born tailor who had moved to France chasing opportunity. He was not an engineer, he was not a scientist, he had no laboratory and no university education. His workshop was small and filled with fabric, needles, and half-finished coats. But inside his mind, he believed he was more than a tailor. He believed he could solve one of aviation's greatest problems: how to survive a fall from the sky. At the beginning of the 20th century, flying was still a dangerous dream. The Wright brothers had flown only a few years earlier, and across Europe, inventors rushed to build airplanes of their own. These machines were fragile frames of wood and cloth, tied together with thin wires. Engines overheated, wings tore apart, fuel leaked. Pilots sat in open cockpits with no protection. When something failed, there was no escape. If the plane broke, the pilot fell with it. Newspapers were filled with stories of crashes. One week, a pilot would be celebrated as a hero for flying farther than anyone before. The next week, his name would appear under a black headline announcing his death. Families watched planes rise into the sky, knowing that every flight could be a final one. Aviation fascinated the world, but it also terrified it. Progress was paid for with human lives. Engineers tried to make stronger planes, but accidents continued. One question returned again and again: what happens when the machine fails? Some inventors believed parachutes were too heavy for aircraft. Others thought pilots would panic and jump too early. But pilots kept dying, and Franz Reichelt believed he had the answer. His idea was simple. If a parachute could be worn as clothing, then a pilot would never need to search for safety equipment. The coat itself would become the parachute. He imagined a jacket that unfolded into wings, slowing the fall and allowing the wearer to glide safely to the ground. To him it seemed logical and elegant. He did not see danger, he saw salvation. By day, Reichelt stitched fashionable coats for wealthy Parisians. By night, he studied aviation magazines and drawings of wings. He followed every crash report with obsessive attention. Each accident convinced him that his invention was necessary. Slowly, the idea of the parachute coat consumed him. He cut silk and canvas into strange shapes. He stitched layers together. He added cords to guide the air and rods to hold the fabric open. His workshop filled with failed designs. He tested small models by throwing them from his apartment window. Some fluttered briefly before collapsing. Others fell straight to the street. Every failure should have warned him, but instead it strengthened his belief. He said the models were too light. He said air behaved differently around a human body. He believed weight would make the wings open properly. Over time, his parachute coat became heavier and more complex. What began as a jacket turned into a stiff, awkward device weighing nearly 20 pounds. It was difficult to move in, but Reichelt felt proud of it. He believed he had created something engineers had overlooked. Now he wanted the world to see it work. The Eiffel Tower had become a symbol of modern science and human ambition. Inventors were allowed to test parachutes there, only using mannequins. Reichelt applied for permission and promised to use a dummy. The authorities agreed. But inside, Reichelt had already made his decision. A mannequin could not prove what he believed. Only a man could. And he believed that man should be him. On February 4, 1912, he arrived early at the tower. The weather was cold but clear. Snow covered the ground below. Reporters had been invited. Photographers stood ready. A film camera was prepared to record the experiment. Reichelt wore his parachute coat over ordinary clothes and climbed to the first platform, 57 meters above the ground. Friends tried to stop him. They begged him to use a dummy. They warned him that the coat had never worked properly. Reichelt refused. He said the wings would open. He said his design needed human weight. He said he trusted his invention completely. Standing on the platform, he tightened the straps around his body and looked down at the target placed in the snow. The people below looked like dots. A policeman asked if he was ready. Reichelt nodded and climbed onto a chair near the railing. For a moment, he stood still. Witnesses later said his face changed, as if doubt reached him at the last second. But the cameras were rolling, the crowd was watching, and he stepped forward. He jumped.
For a brief instant, it seemed the fabric might open. Then it collapsed against his body. The wings failed to spread. The heavy cloth did not catch the air. Instead of floating, he fell straight down, pulled only by gravity. In less than 4 seconds, his body struck the frozen ground. The sound echoed across the square. People screamed. Police ran toward him. Doctors were called, but there was nothing they could do. Franz Reichelt was dead the moment he hit the ground. His invention had failed completely. The film of his fall spread across Europe. People watched in silence as the man stepped from the platform and vanished toward the earth. Newspapers called him the Flying Tailor. Some described him as brave, others called him reckless. Engineers examined the coat and saw its flaws clearly. It was too heavy to open quickly. Its surface area was too small. Its fabric was too stiff. A parachute must open wide and instantly. His design could do neither. Yet his death changed the future. It forced inventors and governments to take pilot safety seriously. Engineers began creating lighter, stronger, and more reliable parachutes. During the First World War, pilots were finally given proper parachutes, and thousands of lives were saved. The idea that had killed Reichelt became the tool that protected others. Franz Reichelt never lived to see that future. He believed in his invention more than he feared death. He trusted hope more than physics. And he ignored one of the most important rules of invention: never risk your life to prove an untested idea. His story remains a warning. Progress needs courage, but it also needs proof. Imagination must be balanced with testing. Confidence without evidence can become deadly. On that cold morning in Paris, Franz Reichelt did not jump to die. He jumped believing he would fly. Instead, he became part of history, not as the man who perfected the parachute, but as the man who showed the world why it truly mattered. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Leave a comment below and tell us what you want to see next. Which path should we take next? Great inventions, powerful figures of history, forgotten civilizations, or groundbreaking scientific discoveries? Your ideas might become the next video.